Across the 11 seasons and 125 episodes of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul, the series has amassed a hell of a cast, and I can't say that I've watched enough television to be able to make the statement, but I'd be very surprised if this isn't one of the very best that the medium has to offer. To me, the key here is not necessarily the depth and excellence in the writing and acting, but more so in the amount of variability. Every prominent character in the series is so different from the next, and each is explored to such a scrutinizing degree that I think that anyone could find something to really engage in with a couple of characters at the very least. But depending on what one values, their preferences for this cast could wildly vary. So today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 characters from the entire Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul universe, plus a couple of honorable mentions. My list will be different than yours, so be sure to let me know what you think of my rankings, and feel free to share your own if you'd like. Oh, and full spoiler warning for everything in the series. To start off the honorable mentions, we have the character that is pretty comfortably the most hated in the series, at least in my experience. There are many reasons as to why many don't like or even despise Skylar, some of them justified and some of them not so much in my opinion, but either way I think she's a great character. Anna Gunn does such a fantastic job in portraying what is in my view a very empathetic and human perspective, and while her relationship and dynamics with Walt go through several stages, the consistent factor that remains her core is this desire to keep her family safe. Sometimes she goes about it the wrong way, other times she's spot on, but either way, this core is what draws me to Skylar, and this and the nuances surrounding it is what makes her such an incredibly good character. This may sound dramatic, but it honestly devastates me that I can't put Lalo inside my top 10, because he is a character totally unlike any other in the story, and he's effective from start to finish. Tony Dalton conveys this menacing aura, yet contrasts it with this unbelievable charisma, making Lalo extremely scary in basically any interaction with a protagonistic character. That sly smile of his hides all manner of motives and emotions, and I've literally held my breath during some of his interactions with Jimmy and Kim. This is a villain who talks the talk and walks the walk with a smooth confidence that is downright terrifying, and if anything holds him back from being higher than this number 11 spot, it's me feeling slightly let down and disappointed with his death. I understand the thematics at play here, I understand why it works on paper, but ultimately I just wish it didn't make me feel so underwhelmed in execution. Still a wonderful character. Now that we're properly entering the top 10, we have one of the very best additions to the universe in Nacho Varga. Nacho is a beautiful character with a beautiful conclusion, which just about puts him above Lalo for me in comparison due to him ending on a higher note. Michael Mondo's performance is so soulful and heartfelt, as we see this tragic journey of a man who just shouldn't be living in the way he does. He offers us insight into the underworld of Better Call Saul, only to then show us that it would be best for him if he didn't have this insight at all. But life isn't that simple. He stumbled into it, and then he was stuck. But that didn't mean that he couldn't end things on his own terms, spiting all of those he hated with his demonic growl of a last proclamation and putting an impactful cap on his relationship with his father, which remains one of the saddest and most powerful in the series. Hank is an amazing character that gets better and more layered the longer the story goes on. The series-spanning cat-and-mouse game between him and Walt is absolutely enthralling and one of the main draws of the story, but to me the thing that sticks out the most with Hank is how very natural and human his character is, accentuated by Dean Norris's fantastic use of expressions, especially in very emotionally charged situations. He can be heroic at times but isn't a hero, and he can do horrible things at times but isn't a horrible person. He's prideful yet caring, impulsive yet quite thoughtful in moments, smart yet spiteful sometimes. He has ups and downs and progressions and regressions, and ultimately he went down a road that there was no return from, with his gut-wrenching death signaling the absolute end of everything. If I'm being completely honest, I was taken by surprise by how strong of a character Howard Hamlin ended up being by the end, and how much I liked him. He is such a necessary and important perspective for this universe, as we see things through the eyes of someone who is so diametrically opposed to the world that so many of our characters delve in. And that's all well and good functionally, but in the end, to really nail this sort of character, you need writing that emphasizes his light humanity, and an actor to really sell you on his heart. Luckily, both of those factors were achieved with flying colors. Howard is not perfect, but he is the most decent major character we have in Better Call Saul, and Patrick Fabian props him up wonderfully with this natural charm and decency that seems smug at times from the outside, but that we know is absolutely genuine. Howard is such a clear representation of innocence, and his death, and all that it represents, is one of the most powerful and heartbreaking moments across both series. Kim Wexler is so universally beloved that I feel like putting 6 characters in the universe above her may be a hot take in itself, but this is no slight on her or the absolutely wonderful Rhea Seehorn. I think that Kim's perfectly imperfect relationship with Jimmy is one of the absolute highlights of this series, and her own journey and morbid descent and reality check is one of the most sobering arcs I think I've ever seen, as you almost want to beg her to not tempt fate any further. In the end, Kim does indeed end up surviving the series, but she is forever changed by the horrific things she experienced and by how disgusted she is at herself for doing the things she did. And one of the most striking mirror images is comprised of her and Jimmy at the beginning and end of the story, with so much love and pain and history between the two. She is one half of one of the best fictional relationships I've seen, and more than stands on her own as a character, and her being at number 7 is not due to any flaws whatsoever, but more so just me finding a bit more interest or emotion in the following 6. But make no mistake, Kim is a 10 out of 10 character. When I first started Better Call Saul, I did so with a little bit of trepidation, foolishly wondering if this was going to be some sort of insubstantial project that would lean into Breaking Bad without distinguishing itself. This assumption was quickly corrected, however, and one of the biggest indicators that the story would be able to stand on its own was the artistry and layers put into the character of Chuck. The relationship between the McGill brothers is undoubtedly one of the most heartbreaking, fascinating, complex, and human I've seen in anything, so flawed and nuanced in its presentation and how it tackles the psychology of both brothers, as well as where they come from and how they impacted one another's lives. And the ways in which the story tackles mental health from the angle of Chuck is absolutely unbelievable. Equal parts horrifying, sad, and real, with the brilliant performance from Michael McKean being one of the standouts in the whole universe. To this day, Chicanery remains in contention for my favorite episode in the series, and that pretty much tells a story on its own about how I feel about Chuck. In my opinion, he is the second best character in Better Call Saul despite his early exit, and his impact sent echoes throughout the entire story in multiple ways. What a happy coincidence it was that Jonathan Banks stumbled into the role of Mike Ehrmantraut due to Bob Odenkirk not being able to come into work one day, because the series was forever changed from that moment. Mike is one of the primary characters of the universe, and he strikes such a fine balance between this veteran know-how and a dark sort of pragmatism that can be attributed to a man who has seen some shit, and a very clear heartfelt center that we see through his relationships with Jesse, Nacho, Werner, and most of all, his family. Peeling back the layers even further in Better Call Saul and making him a deuteragonist of sorts was a stroke of genius for how it formed a bridge between the world of law and the underworld before they became inexorably merged, and he's such an engaging and emotional character to follow as we see how he became the way he became in Breaking Bad. He has fantastic dynamics with nearly every major character in each of the two series and so many important lines that encapsulate a lot of what the overall story is about. He adds an irreplaceable layer, and without him, the story wouldn't have nearly as much of the soul as it does. Gustavo Fring is a once-in-a-lifetime antagonist. Played absolutely perfectly by Giancarlo Esposito, he strikes such a fine balance between this cold professionalism and hot, ruthless vengeance, with the two being linked to his tragic backstory with Max. He's brought into the story gradually, almost in a friendly way, but the veil slowly lifts as we learn more and more about him and as Walt pushes him further to the brink. He is so full of this dark, threatening aura and menace, and yet he's backed up with nearly as much substance as any other character through the layers added in Better Call Saul. As we learn more about his past, why he operates the way he does, how Nacho and Lalo had effects on him, and how he met Mike. His back and forth with Walt is phenomenal, and his death is absolutely perfect, being both iconic and completely representative of all that Breaking Bad is about. After Better Call Saul ended, I saw some takes on Twitter that said something to the effect of this universe being the story of two men who seemed fated to meet and change one another's lives. And while I do enjoy the romanticism of that, I don't really think it tracks because of the vital stories it seems to discount. To omit the sheer importance of Kim to Better Call Saul would be ignoring a big part of that narrative, and most prevalent here, I think Breaking Bad is very much Jesse's story, nearly as much as it is Walt's. To me, Aaron Paul's performance as Jesse is the biggest emotional core of the entire Breaking Bad Better Call Saul universe, and his journey to hell and back is one that makes you wish with all your heart that he can somehow claw his way out of the dark. He does many bad things, he makes many mistakes, and he stumbles constantly. But he always tries to be better, he always maintains that heart in the end, and the fact that he makes it out screaming in exhilaration and out of a yearning for life is the tiny glimmer of hope the show needed. Fun fact, I've never seen El Camino, and I never want to, because the ending to Jesse's story in the show was everything I could have ever wanted for him. It was always going to come down to these two, I suppose. Bob Odenkirk's performance as Jimmy McGill and Saul Goodman and Gene and Kevin Costner on occasion is the achievement of a lifetime. He has so many amazing dynamics with other characters, perhaps the most fantastic ones in the series, with Kim, Chuck, Mike, Walt, Lalo, Howard, and more. But what gets me the most about Jimmy is the subtlety and nuance as he strides further and further away from who he wanted to be in the first place. From the beginning, we know where Better Call Saul is ending, at least outside of the Gene stuff, and so we know that Jimmy is not going to end up this righteous, compassionate lawyer who ends up doing things the right way as he may have dreamt he would have been. He will become detached, cynical, unemotional mostly, but oddly fragmented at times if you look deeper into some little moments. And knowing that, as we also learn how he was, makes the descent desperately sad. But it also makes the moment where he retakes his name while condemning himself oddly gratifying, as he owns up to all that he's done with an interesting form of pride. There is no one like Jimmy McGill, and his journey is arguably the most layered in the series. Other characters come close, but there is realistically no one else that could have been number one. I've seen plenty say that Jimmy is better, and on the rare occasion, I even see the odd person who prefers Jesse or Kim. And I get that, but at the same time, for me, Walter White is just undefeated. Bryan Cranston pulls out one of the all-time great performances as this series meticulously chronicles the prideful journey of a man just desperate to have some semblance of control, authority, and adrenaline in his life, and who takes it way too far. He loses his family and the reason he did any of this in the first place, so he has plenty of individual regrets, but his overall demeanor by the end very much feels like he doesn't regret making the decision overall. He liked it, he was good at it, and it made him feel alive. While his arc is fantastic, there are so many layers to Walt that can inspire theories to this day, so much nuance to uncover about his childhood and relationship with memories, what he informs us about cycles of power and the ego. He is simultaneously sympathetic in some ways and deplorable in others. He is caring and manipulative to all those around him. He is both an enigma and the most genuine human being you're ever going to see. Walter White is one of the best characters of all time, and he is without doubt my favorite in this entire universe. So after agonizing over it for a while, this is my list. There is definitely some possibility for change in the future through rewatches and further reflection, but that's always the case with something like this. Thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to share your thoughts and let me know how much I got wrong if you think I did get stuff wrong. And please feel free to share your own top 10 if you feel so inclined. Many thanks for watching.